Hello and welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today I'm in the town of Nairn. This is the north coast of the Speyside. It's a bit of a windy day in October. It's nice waves and very, very beautiful beaches. So in the summer, that one day of summer that Scotland has, this must be really good for bathing around here. But we're not talking about bathing and sandy beaches today. We're talking about whiskey. The port of Nairn was actually an important part in the Scotch whiskey history, as it was the place to ship out royal whiskey. And I'm talking about Royal Brackla single malt whiskey. And yeah, let's get to the distillery and find out what they do. The history of the distillery begins with a 15-year-old boy called William Fraser. And he was joining the army to fight overseas. And as the years progressed, he was a very committed soldier. He was committed to the empire, and he had 30 years of service, and he rose up through the ranks and became captain. And by becoming captain, you make quite a lot of money. So he got wounded a couple of times, so he got transferred to the Scottish Highland Veterans Battalion. And with that money he had, he went to the House of Cawdor and talked to them and talked to the local farmers, and he wanted actually to build a distillery here at the near the Cawdor estate, which he then did with a few local farmers. But he didn't do it as in, he didn't build it like everybody else, like an illicit distilling, but he actually got a proper license in 1812. That is actually possible. So a lot of distilleries tell you, yeah, you couldn't distill in the Highlands. Yeah, you couldn't distill in the Highlands and make money because the license fees were so high that you couldn't sell it. Everybody else was distilling illicitly, and he was really priced out. And he actually wrote to the commissioner and said, I can't sell my whiskey within a 120-mile radius of the distillery. Please do something about it. And he was really pushing for that 1823 act where the distilling fees got a lot lower and everybody got legal. Like pretty much every distillery has its founding date 1824 or somewhere around there. And yeah, so he was really doing business by the books. So he couldn't sell his stuff locally. He sold it down to Aberdeen still. The prices were probably not that good there, and even to Glasgow, and he also sold it to London. And the King, William IV, he really liked the Highland whiskies, and he just, in public, he cannot drink any illegal spirits. That would be a scandal, or it would be bad optics. And so what he did is, the Brackla whiskey was really, really good. So he said, okay, this whiskey is good and I am granting this whiskey a royal warrant. So he got his royal warrant in 1833, and the king said then, this is the king's own whiskey. So yeah, that was when Royal Brackla was allowed to use royal in the name of the Brackla Distillery, so it was Royal Brackla. Later then in 38, his son took over. That is a very good point because they got the royal warrant renewed by Queen Victoria, and so on that royal warrant it already said Robert Fraser. So yeah, that was his son taking over the company. It got sold a couple of times, merged a lot into other companies over the years. So yeah, it was a long time between then and now. During the World War, there was even an airstrip there from the Royal Air Force, and a couple of soldiers stayed in the distillery, so it was kind of a bit of part of the war effort. But in the recent past, it belonged to Diageo, and they were considered a monopoly, so they had to sell stuff. So they got moved with the Dewars family to Bacardi, which is the company that runs the distillery today. So the whiskey starts with ingredients, and one ingredient is the malt, and that is very important. And also, of course, the quality is very important, but there are different strains, different species of barley. So you have Sassy, you have Concerto, you have Laureate, and sometimes that changes. Obviously, distilleries try to remain the same, get the same sizes, get the same product, and the big maltings, they do tend to do a good job in having good consistency, but there are some differences, and so you have to have a bit of quality control. So what you do with the mill is you don't mill it down to a fine flour, but you do it with a coarse grist. And how you quality control that is you mill it, and then you take exactly 100 grams and put it in this box. So you put it in the box, and there are sieves in there. So what you do, you put it in, and then you shake it, and you get the first sieve collects the husks, then you have the grists, and then you have the flour or the grits. And that means you have your 3 ingredients, and they should be in the right ratio that you have at some point defined. If you have something then diverting from that in your weight ratio, because you weigh them afterwards, then you have to adjust the dials on the mill. So you want something a little bit more coarse, you take the rollers out, something more fine, more flour, and then you take the rollers a bit closer together. If you have too much flour, it becomes a bit too sticky, and you have problems. If you have it too coarse, you don't dissolve everything, so you have efficiency problems there. So you have to find that sweet spot that you have at some point found at the beginning when you were beginning to distill, so and try to have quality control, stay the course. The next ingredient then is the water, and the water here is a nice water that they get from a local spring. I think back in the days they probably got it from Cawdor Burn, but nowadays they use the cooling water from Cawdor Burn, and they have a much purer spring that has a much better water that is a bit more indoors and gets into the distillery underground with pipes. So yeah, a good water source is always very important as the ingredients for a distillery. The mash tun holds 13 tons of grist, and the sparging is done with the water from the Kersach springs for the first water at about 64.5 degrees Celsius. So a bit lower than normal, but pretty hot. And that dilutes all the sugars, all the starches, and the enzymes within the malt split up all the starches into sugar, and that is creating a very, very, very sugary mash. They don't have a second and a third water, but they have a continuous sparging. So what they do is they sprinkle on water. The second one, they start at 75 degrees Celsius, and they work themselves up to 85 degrees Celsius. Where you sprinkle it on, it runs through, stays there a little bit, and gets filtered continuously through the false floor and collected. But they have that ramp of temperature, but at some point they have to say, okay, there's too little sugar left in there, so we stop, and that other water that goes up to 85, that has so little sugar that it has to be recycled and used for the next one, to have that little sugar in there also being used to have the maximum efficiency. And that sugary substance, that really, really sweet, they call it wort, is then transferred into the next room. The 59,000 liters of wort end up in one of these mash tuns. The distillery has 6 wooden wash tuns, wash bags, and 2 fermenters of stainless steel outside. Yes, they ferment for 70 hours, and that is right at the point where you come from malty, grassy to fruity. So what they are looking for is fruity, light, clean wort. So that is what they want to create flavor-wise. They end up, after their time, they end up about 8% alcohol, which is fairly low, so it's more of flavor as in a lot of alcohol, so which is good. Interesting is, these wooden wash bags, they are not made of Oregon pine or Douglas fir. Oregon pine and Douglas fir is the same tree, it's just the Americans call it Oregon pine, Europeans call it Douglas fir. They are actually made of Siberian larch. Don't worry, they're not here taking wood from Siberia and shipping it all around the globe, but Siberian larch also grows in Scotland, so it's a domestic tree. And yeah, these two trees, the Douglas fir or Oregon pine and the Siberian larch, they are the perfect tree for baking big tons. They are growing very straight. They are not as porous as other trees, so they are quite dense, and I don't think they're as dense as oak, but they have also the ability that they don't bend when you steam them. So this is really good when you have the steam cleaning, so you don't get any big bumps and bendings. Obviously in cask it's a different topic. So yeah, that is what you do here with the washbacks. This is where the alcoholic fermentation happens, and the lactobacterial fermentations. This is where the alcohol and the flavors are basically created. The next step is the distilling, the centerpiece of the distillery. We're coming off with 59,000 liters wash, and each wash still is charged with nearly 20,000 liters of that wash. So every wash still gets emptied about 2/3 of the way to fill both wash stills. The next charge then has a bit of a task to have 1/3 from the last one, 1/3 from the first one. So they split it up a little bit. So you do have some of the batches who are a bit over the 70 hours of fermentation, get a little bit more into the fruity side. The wash stills, very big, very tall. They are filled with nearly 20,000 liters. Very interesting. What they just did is the old process that has been running for years and years and probably is still running, is that you just have a constant flow through your condensers. What they did is they actually have new sensors here, so they can see the flow rate of the stills, and they can then adjust the pumps accordingly. And it takes a lot less energy than to cool it down, because you don't always have the maximum amount of wash flowing through the condensers. In terms of taste, the spirit still is the taste producer and the most important thing here. And what they do is they have a big spirit still. It is pretty wide, but still it is also pretty tall. And what they do have, they have an incline in the line arm. So everything that condenses in the line arm flows back down into the pot, and that is also some sort of reflux, where you have flowing back into the pot, getting more copper contact, becoming lighter, taking out the unwanted flavors. And that is exactly what they want to have here. They want to have slightly fruity, a little bit grassy, light Highland character. This is what you're looking for at the distillery. The output of the distillery is 4 million liters of alcohol, which is quite a lot. So not everything goes into the single malt, but the single malt is increasing gradually, as single malt is really considered as the more premium product. But it still is a very good ingredient for the blends that belong to the Dewar's family. So this is the still room, and let's head back over and see how that gets into casks. Unfortunately, the distillery does not have any warehouses on site. If you drive past the distillery, there are warehouses that you see up the road, and these warehouses unfortunately do not belong to the distillery. There are also two kind of ruined warehouses, really old dunnage warehouses. They are not up to code, they're in disrepair, but maybe sometimes they will use that for the Royal Brackla single malt. Everything here from the distillery is put into a tanker and trucked down to Glasgow to be casked, and most of it goes as the malt component in their blends, but also they do have the Royal Brackla single malt. And if you look behind me, that is a bit of a historic thing. That is the vatting tank, where you put all the casks in, and then put in the spirit and cask put into the cask, and you get your whiskey married together. And the motto on there is really, really nice. The King's Own Whiskey. Yeah, it's kind of a nice motto. Yeah, so enough talk about how the whiskey is made. Let's have a look at that single malt. So I'm sitting here with Matthew Cawdor,
yeah, perfect.
And you've been now for 15 years within the whiskey industry.
Yeah.
5 years with Dewar's.
Yep.
As a, what is it, global brand ambassador?
Yeah, so well, three years now as global ambassador. And before that, I think when we first met, I was the brand homes ambassador. So looking after special visits to the distillery. So got a race since last time, yeah, bonus.
So yeah, if you've recognized him, he was also in the Aberfeldy video, which belongs to also the Dewar's.
Same group, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, nice bottles.
Lovely
bottles. Can you tell us what we're having today?
So today we're going to be looking at the wonderful new range of Royal Brackla. I say new, Bacardi is a company. We initially launched our Royal Brackla range at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, but we've had a bit of a restaging of the Royal Brackla range, which we launched in December 2020. So relatively new, but still, yeah, our wonderful new range.
So what did change?
Big change for us, you know, when we first launched, I think we were learning how best to work with Royal Brackla as a single malt in its own right. You know, historically, it'd been used a lot in blends for us, and whichever company owned it. For us, though, we've realised that it's this character we want to celebrate, and it has this lovely kind of summer breeze in a glass. So I think allowing a little bit more of a lift in that character and really exploring sherry casks a bit more. You know, we say sherry casks really are our finishing touch for the Royal Brackla range. The original range, everything for that initial maturation was a combination of casks. So we had some first fill bourbon, we had some first fill sherry, we had some refill casks, and we had some rechar casks. We took that combination of casks and we finished everything, the 12, the 16, the 21, in first fill Oloroso sherry. Now with the range, you're seeing we've gone from 40% ABV, we're up to 46% ABV. We previously weren't natural colour. Now the entire range of Royal Brackla is natural colour, and as well, we're non-chill filtered. So we get those much bigger, rich fatty acids, esters in, a little bit of a richer mouthfeel.
So you kind of went from like mainstream beginner with colouring to really a malt head expert thing.
I think so. You know, I think it really is this lovely spirit, this lovely character that deserved to be shown off in a little bit more of a traditional bottling kind of style.
Okay, yeah, very nice. So, what's the first one we're going to have?
I think it makes sense to start with the 12 as well. So let's start with that 12, the classic. Now, we've got these lovely bottles up here, but in true fashion, here's some I prepared earlier, right? So we've got some open, ready for sampling. So straight away, as I've said here, it is natural colour. And looking at this bottle, you can see there a lovely dark rich colour. Initial maturation for us here is just ex-bourbon cask, almost all refill casks as well.
Okay.
I think, again, we have a wonderful malt master in Stephanie McLeod. She's one of the most award-winning whiskey makers in the world now. Why people give Stephanie awards, you know, why she wins all these big awards, is because of her ability to create balance within a whiskey. And I think what we celebrate with Stephanie's style of whiskey making is showing off that distillery character, that distillery DNA. It would be very easy to take that matured spirit, put it in a big first fill sherry cask for full maturation. It will taste good, but you would lose a lot of the more nuance, a lot of the more kind of subtle notes of that distillery character. So here, initial maturation for that 12 years, say predominantly in the ex-bourbon refill casks, it really allows the distillery character to age through, and then we're finishing it for about 6 months in the first fill Oloroso sherry. So again, if you go in with the nose there, wow, right? Any initial thoughts for yourself here?
Yeah, it is a bit, you have a bit of that freshness, as you said, freshness in the glass.
Definitely.
And, but still, yeah, a dominant Oloroso sherry note. Yeah. And yeah, it doesn't lose the nuance. It is a nice sherry whiskey.
Yep.
Doesn't lose the nuance. But do you call yourself a Speyside or a Highland?
A Highland, very much a Highland. I know you're saying it's, this lovely, fruity, fresh note. I think a lot of people would think that's fairly typical of the Highlands, but we're of the Speyside, sorry, but we are just over the line, classified as a Highland whiskey here.
Oh, you just
so we're a little bit over, just outside of Speyside.
It's like your river is the was it Cawdor Burn or?
Yeah, so exactly. So our water source, for our cooling pond, Cawdor Burn.
So the Cawdor Burn doesn't go into the Spey.
I don't think so. I need to look at a map for that one, but I don't believe so.
Yeah, but it's lovely. It's as you said, it's a balanced one. You have a bit of that vanilla caramel, just lightly.
Yep.
A lot of dried fruits and a lovely sherry character.
For me, it is everything in perfect balance. You've mentioned a lot of different flavor notes there. Some obviously from the ex-bourbon influence. Those lovely vanillas. I think a lot of that rich kind of ripe fruitiness comes through from that Royal Brackla character. Stephanie, our malt master, she says, Brackla is like a summer breeze in a glass.
I still can't really pin down what the freshness is like. Give it a name. Is it lime? Is it a peppermint? Is it red?
For me,
I don't know.
Lovely fresh fruits, I think. But as you say, obviously that caramel coming through, and alongside those fresh fruits, we've got the typical kind of dried fruits you'd expect coming from Oloroso sherry, and that little bit of cinnamon. There's that kind of warming spice that you'd expect from Oloroso as well. So for me, it's this perfectly balanced, rounded Highland whiskey.
Yeah. Slàinte.
Cheers, slàinte. Prost. And again, I think with that 46% non-chill filtered, the way that the whiskey coats the palate, right, it is just such a wonderfully round and rich mouthfeel. What do you think to that?
Did you say 46 or 48?
46, 46 for us.
Carries a good amount of volume.
Well, definitely for that as well.
It has that. Okay, it has that obviously that cherry character. I have a good amount of that Oloroso nuttiness. Feels a little bit even crispy, like roasted almonds or roasted nuts or something like that. Combined with a nice sweetness. Vanilla caramel, I would say more caramel, more of that, or toffee or something like that.
100%.
But the nuttiness of the Oloroso comes through really nice.
I think there was that nuttiness and to say that kind of cinnamon spice for me. It's quite a warming, quite a a rich whiskey in that way. But not a bad place to start, right?
It works well. I think Royal Brackla, as it was used or is used a lot in blends, is a bit underappreciated. As it's a bit of a hidden gem. You don't have a visitor center.
Not yet. If the fans watching this drink a few more bottles of Royal Brackla, who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe we can get that visitor center open.
Yeah, it would be a nice thing. We've been to Nairn, and it's a lovely place, and it was a lovely restaurant, and we had really lovely sands, and the area is quite nice.
Yeah, I think this part of Scotland is a hidden gem, in its own right. But I totally agree with the whiskey. I think with its long and rich history with blended whiskies, we haven't seen much of it as a single malt yet. But I think now, people who finally are getting to appreciate it as a single malt.
Just need a bit of better connection to Inverness, probably.
That's true. I
think it has one to Frankfurt, but I'm not quite sure.
So, as I say, for me, the new range, it really is an exploration now of sherry cask finishing. So, that 12-year-old starting with the Oloroso, we're going to see a slight change as we start to now move through the range as well.
Yeah, I think with the changes, 46, unchill filtered, no colored, you really took a step into the direction that you recognize, because it's now a proper whiskey that is not just somewhere on the shelf, but it's like it has a good, decent chance to stand up to its brothers that have been a bit more well established.
Yeah.
Speaking of well established, I mean, you are like one of the oldest
one of the oldest legally founded distilleries in Scotland, and I think
that gives you. I mean, everybody else is like, okay, we have the first paper is 1824 or 5 or something like that, and you have like, okay, we have 1812 aboard.
1812,
yeah. That is so cool. I mean, how was that possible? I mean, you had to pay taxes, but everybody said it's where the taxman couldn't go. You couldn't still distill. So did the taxman really come to the distillery?
Yeah, 100% as well. I think there's there's so many misconceptions because that year of 1824 is when so many distilleries began in the Highlands of Scotland, obviously with that change in Excise Act in 1823. So I think we've just not been as not talked about it as much as well. But you start to see taxes in Scotland from the mid 1600s on whiskey. So it's been obviously taxed for a long time, which meant there was a legal license, obviously, for the taxation as well. So, but it just wasn't as common. And you mentioned there about it being a bit more of a prestigious way of bottling the whiskey now. I think we have one of the most prestigious whiskies in Scotland here, with such a rich history. As you say, we started as Brackla Distillery, but within a few years we became Royal Brackla Distillery. The first of only 3 distilleries in history to get the right to use that word royal in their distillery name, along with the royal warrant.
Yeah. I mean, the royal warrant, is that now because the Queen died? So I think you have to renew it.
We do.
Is that like a really? I mean, is she already dead a year, or is she?
Must be thereabouts. Yeah. So
is time running out for you? Or you have that under control?
I believe we do have a few years of a sort of grace period, a period where because we had our royal warrant renewed not that long before the Queen sadly passed away, it means that there's a grace period of a few years. To be honest, it's quite an unusual situation. Nobody living in these jobs now looking after royal warrants has been in the situation where the reigning monarch has passed, giving way to another monarch. So it's a bit of a learning for us all. It's a bit of an interesting time, but
I think with the late Queen, we were a bit what do you call it, spoiled, because she lived very, very long, and she reigned very, very, very long. So this whole renewing the warrant and all of that kind of bureaucracy behind that didn't happen to all of all of the
uncharted territory for us now.
It happened. It didn't happen for such a long time, so nobody knows. Like, oh, okay, the Queen's dead.
Fingers crossed. Charles enjoys our whiskey, so it's that'd be great.
Yeah, I think you'll get it. But the thing is, it's really new territory, as you said.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as a
everybody
company,
felt like she would go on forever.
I would say, as a company, we now have the longest continuously held royal warrant in the history of Scotch whisky. So it has been re-granted by every monarch since Queen Victoria. So fingers crossed, as I say, Charles is a fan.
Yeah, he likes his whiskey. So what's up next? It's a bit strange here when you look at it.
So you're not the first person to say this. And next up we have the wonderful Royal Brackla 18. Now, if I was forced to pick a favourite in the range, a personal favourite, this is probably it for me.
Okay.
And I think you'll have a lot of whiskey fans looking at a range and thinking, okay, you've got quite a dark 12-year-old there. Then a really light 18, quite unusual to have your older expression lighter in colour than your younger expression, and then into a nice dark and rounded 21. A big part of that is to do with the sherry casks, which we're using here. So Palo Cortado. Now, as I mentioned, the original Royal Brackla range for us was a 12-year-old, a 16 and a 21.
Okay.
And the whole of the original range was that combination of casks for kind of initial maturation and then finishing in first fill Oloroso. Now what Stephanie wants to do is kind of explore sherry casks. So we've started, again, very familiar territory with the 12 and that lovely Oloroso finish. Now we wanted to try something a bit more experimental. And I would say it's becoming, I think, a much more popular finishing cask now. We are starting to see a few more distilleries using it. But Palo Cortado is one of the kind of rarer sherries in the sherry world. And the reason for that is it's quite unusual. It is seen as almost a mistake within the world of sherry. And again, at your bodegas, again, as they're producing the sherries, it's almost this mistake where as they're producing a sherry that has a biological aging, where you kind of allow this layer of yeast called flor to kind of grow within the sherry, there's something happens in the warehouse, maybe a temperature fluctuation or something, where it starts off with this flor, this layer of yeast, and then suddenly there's a change takes place where the yeast dies away. And then you have an oxidative aging process, so more similar to what we'd expect with Oloroso or PX. So I think what we're more used to. So more like, again, those biological agings are like your Finos and Amontillado as well. So it makes it almost a mistake.
So it's a mistake to make it Fino.
Yeah, almost exactly that kind of idea. It's where you end up with this. As I say, it's a really interesting, I think, from a flavour perspective, a really interesting sherry. You have these lovely kind of, again, if you have a nose here, you'll see a lot of that Palo Cortado kind of notes reflected in the character here. You've got these lovely kind of top-end citrus notes for me. But alongside that, there's this kind of interesting, funky, earthy note, you know, kind of tobacco leaves, or kind of almost a leathery kind of note in there as well. So it's a funky note. I don't know how better to describe it. Do you know what I mean?
It's a strange combination between a bit of a, like, not fresh, but I would say tropical fruit.
Yeah.
Not too much like melon, but more like mango or something, I don't know. Feels a bit banana or something creamy.
As you say, tropical, I think, is the word.
Yeah, and then you have, as you said, the other side of the coin with the earthy, tobacco, hefty. So that is a strange combination.
It's a very interesting balance. Now, we were joking about this earlier, obviously, we were filming outside today, and we always joke, you know, that there are 2 seasons in Scotland. There is winter in July, and occasionally in July we have this day that we call summer. You might have heard it. Okay, so I can imagine on that rare summer's day that we have in Scotland, this is the perfect whiskey to have, right?
It's whiskey for that one day.
If there is a summer whiskey, this is it. You know, as you say, it's that lovely kind of fresh tropical side of Royal Brackla.
But it's strange that it combines with that hefty volume then.
I think it works, you know, very well. At 46% again, natural colour, non-chill filtered. I think it's a great way to show off this prestigious whiskey. Again, I think it really holds its own as that wonderful mouthfeel at that 46% as well. But everything you've said there, it is light, it is fresh, it is summery. As I say, it's that interesting combination. Lovely top-end citrus notes, really kind of funky, earthy, kind of grounding notes in the finish there.
You have that tropical banana, mango, nice in there. Good amount of sweetness, I would say. Even maybe a honey note or something, I don't know.
Yeah, quite sweetness.
And what I want to say, but the earthy, I found it more like a spicy note in there.
Okay, yeah.
So
but kind of like a wood spice, or
I don't know. Or like a little bit of a white pepper or something like that, or also a bit of a oaky note. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think, you know, we've mentioned the word spice, I guess, with the 12, but as I say, if that was more of a, as you say, cinnamon spice, that was more that kind of warming, rich, rounded spice.
Yeah, this was
as you say, kind of peppery, kind of woody. Is that?
Yeah, this was more like Christmas spices. And this was more, I don't know, like curry. I don't know.
But yeah, peppery note, I think.
Peppery notes. Yeah, curry is not that precise, I would say.
But I think quite a different whiskey from what we've seen before from Royal Brackla. I think this is a real one for the geeks, you know, looking for something different, something special. I would highly recommend giving this one a try.
This is a very interesting combination, and really, I have much respect for whiskey creation teams or master blenders or something, because blending whiskeys together to get a balance where you don't have something that just sticks out like a sore thumb is difficult. Everybody can do. I think everybody can do a whiskey where you just go cherry bomb.
Yeah.
I think that is not that difficult.
And it's going to taste good, right?
It's going to taste good, yeah.
A lot of people love a sherry bomb, but I think, as you say, trying to use sherries in a way where you still have that balance with the distillery DNA, the distillery character, that's not easy. As I say, that's why now Stephanie, she has won for the 5th time Master Blender of the Year at the International Whisky Competition. She really is one of the most award-winning whisky makers in the world. Not only has Stephanie won awards, but in fact this range as well, across the San Francisco Spirits Competition, the International Whisky Competition, the World Whisky Awards. We have won category trophies, double golds across the range, and a couple of years ago now, our 21 won Best Highland Single Malt Whisky in the world at the World Whisky Awards, right? So some real crowd pleasers and whisky geek pleasers here, I think, within our new range.
Yeah, so that is really interesting. That leads me really to my next question. So what is the future of the brand? What are you doing with that? You mentioned like, we could expand. I think there's abandoned warehouses, and you have. I think you have the stock. That is a beautiful position. So
Yeah.
Are there any intentions to go in any directions?
Never say never. That's what I say. You know, we really are at absolute capacity for the distillery at the moment. Obviously, a lot of our whiskies we've discussed going around the distillery, we still are quite heavily used in blends. My team, of course, would love to see more and more of that coming into being bottled as single malts. As well as our core range, you know, which we're tasting today, the 12, 18, 21. Within our company, we do something called exceptional casks. So for us, exceptional casks kind of fall under three kind of territories. We have single casks, which literally means for us, it's a single cask, no finishing, however it comes out, cask strength into the bottle, done, right? Okay. Fantastic whiskey. We also do what we call a double cask, which really is a single cask, one cask worth of whiskey that we then take and we transfer either to a secondary cask for a significant period of time, or also we put it just into a finishing cask for several months. So we call that a double cask. Again, there's no official terminology agreed yet in the industry, but for us it's taking a single cask worth of liquid and transferring, as I say, to a secondary cask for a period of time. We finally have what we call small batch, where it'll be maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 different casks combined together. So, you know, you're looking at, instead of being a few hundred bottles, you know, with a single cask, you maybe got closer to 1,000 bottles or just over within a small batch. But all kind of 3 examples there under the exceptional cask name are casks, you know, when our malt master Stephanie and the team that work with her of blenders, when they're kind of going through nosing and analysing casks, sometimes they spot something that's just a little bit different. You know, they think they want to celebrate it rather than kind of lose it in with the, you know, the sort of combination of casks to make the core range. So I really think our exceptional cask range is celebrating different facets, different sides of that beautiful Royal Brackla character. So we have seen, you know, a number of different single casks where it could just be just a single sherry cask, you know, a bit more of a sherry bomb. It could just be just a refill bourbon cask for its full life. We are doing limited editions now, so every year we are planning to release some limited editions. So we have seen, I think it was a Fino and a Amontillado, 15-year-old coming out with Royal Brackla as well. So watch this space. As I say, the core range is there to stay, as I say, with the 12, 18, 21, but we are adding some limited editions every year, kind of usually at sort of 15 years old, and we will have a lovely range of exceptional casks coming out from Royal Brackla every year as well.
That sounds good. Experimenting is always nice, and especially if you have someone who knows what he's doing.
Which we definitely do with Stephanie.
Okay, so the last one is a 21-year-old. I think the choice of age is very, very nice because we've done a little bit of a questionnaire with our customers. We analyzed the shop data, and we found out that people enjoy their whiskeys most with 18 to 21. So this is the, like, we've seen that is the sweet spot where the people think, that is a really good Scotch.
I mean, although I'll say my personal favourite, just for its interestingness and character, is the 18. By far the big crowd pleaser, the big award winner is the 21. And I think this is itself a masterclass in sherry in one glass. Because for this, we're not just maturing in one sherry cask or finishing in one sherry cask. We are finishing across 3 different kinds of sherry casks and combining together. So it's an incredibly complicated whiskey to make. I'm sure the warehousing team are not a big fan of Stephanie for putting this together. It's a lot of extra work for them, you know, a lot of moving of casks and combining of casks. But again, just like we've seen with the 12, the 18, the 21, that initial maturation, we're focusing on the refill bourbon casks there. And then we're aging up to, say, 21 years in the refill bourbon casks. And then we're introducing the finishing casks for about 6 months. So majority will be in first fill Oloroso for that time, so the largest proportion. Another smaller proportion is aged separately for finishing in the Palo Cortado cask, like we saw in the 18. And then the smallest amount is finished separately in PX, Pedro Jimenez cask. Now, I know there's a big smile, a big nod there, right? I think there's a lot of big fans of PX casks. It can be that really heavy, that really dominant sherry cask. So that's why the smallest amount for creating balance is finished in the PX cask. But I think when you take it to the nose,
as you said, the smallest portion.
The smallest portion, but it's still there, right?
It has a bit of an influence there. It feels a little bit like the 12-year-old older brother.
Yes.
But I think you can get in a lot deeper into that glass.
100%. But I think it's really nice now, as you know, and anyone who's watching this video on YouTube, I would encourage you, if you can get the 12 and 18, the 21 together, I think it's the most interesting way to do a tasting like this, because by the time you get to the 21, it reminds you, you can see that influence that we've seen in the 12. You can see that Oloroso and what it brings to the Royal Brackla
Also,
character.
a little bit of that Paulo Cotaro. I'm not quite sure if that is the distillery character of the Paulo Cotaro. I don't know.
For me, it's got that zestiness and again, that bit of sort of an earthy funk to it as well. So you can see that Oloroso, the lovely, rich, dried fruits, that lovely, warming cinnamon spice. You can see that slight peppery spice, that lovely kind of top line citrus note, that earthiness of the 18. But I think what I'm really greeted with here is that lovely, deep richness you expect with the PX. It's dessert-like, isn't it?
It's a nice combination, yeah. I think she really went for balanced, and that is definitely what you feel in that glass. You have a bit of everything, and you have it not so strong that you can feel it from all sides.
I mean, that takes real skill. This is not an easy whiskey to put together. And getting that balance of all three casks, and still though the Royal Brackla Distillery character, right? We still have that. We've not lost that lovely freshness, that summer breeze in a glass, that clean acidity in the whiskey.
I mean, it's a bit less strong. It's still there.
Yeah, I mean the PX is such a big bold flavor, right?
Oh, I think the Oloroso is a bit, I would say, a little bit dominant in the nose. In the taste, you have that has a lot of complexity.
Yeah,
that is something you to take apart for if you could take it apart for hours probably if you're really into it and you're geeky and malty out there. Oh yeah, that is nice. 21 is just also that is kind of my age. That is kind of my age for a whiskey.
I think for anyone who would describe themselves as a fan of sherried whiskey, this is an absolute must try, right? Delicious. Well, cheers. It's been great to have you here. Slanje, Prost.
Thank you very much for having us here. Yeah,
pleasure.
It was a lovely day. It was a bit windy and a bit cold, but that's.
There is no bad weather in Scotland, just the wrong clothes. So I'm glad we both had our jackets today. Much needed. Cheers.
That was nice. Cheers. Yeah. So, also, thank you very much for watching. If you found this video interesting, then please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you'd like to buy one of these or all three of these bottles, go to Whisky.de or Whisky.com and you will find them in our shop. Plus maybe a few exceptional casks, bottlings from exceptional casks. And yeah, thank you very much for watching and see you next time.